Survival and homeostasis. So every organism has a certain set of basic survival needs. For us, we need nutrients, we need oxygen, we need water, we need to stay within a certain range of temperatures, and we need to stay within a certain range of atmospheric pressures. Nutrients include things like carbohydrates, so simple and complex sugars, proteins to build tissue, fats for energy storage, for padding other structures. Vitamins and minerals are micronutrients that you need to consume to make sure that everything else works properly. If you don't have enough of one of these instead of another, your body has ways sometimes of making up for it. If you don't eat enough in the way of carbohydrates or even just overall calories, your body's going to start harvesting from protein and fat sources, turn those structures into carbohydrates, and then use the carbs as fuel. Some organs, like your brain, for example, only uses carbs. If you never eat carbs again, your body's going to have to find a way to turn other stuff into carbs so that your brain can work. And vice versa, you can use building blocks of carbohydrates to make proteins. Carbohydrates can get converted and stored as glycogen in the liver, which can then get turned into fats. So your body has ways of helping itself out with these nutrients to an extent, but there's some things it can't do. It can't just make minerals. Minerals are rock-like items in the world that you need tiny doses of to make sure that your organs and cells, certain cells, work properly. Your body can't make rocks. So you do need to consume a certain number of minerals. Vitamins can be sometimes made by your gut biome, and sometimes you have to actually consume the vitamin directly so that in order to get it. Vitamins and minerals that you have to consume specifically in order to incorporate it are called essential. So when you see a commercial and they say blah, blah, blah number of essential vitamins and minerals, those are ones that you have to get from your diet. Your body can't make it itself. Your biome isn't making it for you. An example of a vitamin that your body makes is vitamin D. You get exposed to, your skin gets exposed to UV light. Your skin cells then take that UV light energy and use it to make vitamin D, which helps you build strong bones. To an extent, if you're getting enough sunlight and your diet's good otherwise, you don't need to consume additional vitamin D to get vitamin D. Other stuff, though, like I believe vitamin A, is an essential vitamin where you have to get it from your diet somewhere. Oxygen is a basic survival need. All this stuff sounds really evident, but it's going to come into play in a more nuanced way later. Oxygen is a highly volatile chemical, or a highly volatile atom. What that really means for practical purposes is that it's super, super eager to make bonds, break bonds, to swap itself around with other atoms, to do a lot of stuff. Therefore, it's good at getting stuff done throughout the body. You can burn it. It can be consumed fairly quickly. It's really good at shuttling electrons around. These are basic things that your body will do to make energy and do work. Water is roughly 50 to 60% of our total weight. It is a necessary environment for chemical reactions sustaining life. Whenever you think about life processes, you should be thinking about it as occurring in an aqueous environment, a water-filled environment, unless you're directed to think of it otherwise. The cells of our body are almost 100% filled with a water-based substance and surrounded by a water-based substance. Water is a really good solvent for other molecules. It's slightly polar. We'll talk about that later. And so it's good at shuttling other molecules back and forth across gradients to do work. Your body wants to stay within a normal temperature. So whenever you hear about what normal body temperature is, right, what do you think? You think 98.6 Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. First of all, while I'm thinking about it, forget about Fahrenheit. We're never going to use Fahrenheit in this class. This is a science class, so we use Celsius. Metric system rules in science. You hear 37 degrees Celsius. But let's just stick with Fahrenheit for a second because most of us are more familiar with that. Normal body temperature is supposed to be 98.6. But what if you go to the doctor and it's 98.2? Are they going to say, oh my God, you're hypothermic, let's get you into a warm room pronto? No, it's fine. Your body temperature, and in fact all of your physiological optimal places, is within a certain range. It's not a set number, it's a range. Your ideal body weight for your height, your ideal BMI, is a range. Your ideal temperatures are within a certain range. Your ideal concentration of sodium in your bloodstream is within a certain range. There's not a single set number that you're striving for. Your blood pressure, what do they tell you? It should be 120/80. It should be no more than 120/80, but 100/76 is fine. Your normal optimal blood pressure is really anywhere between 90/60 to 120/80. Anywhere in there is considered generally fine. Outside of that range, bad things start to happen. All of your cells and your proteins and your macromolecules are most stable within that temperature range. Once you leave that range, instability starts to happen. What happens if you take an egg that's sitting at room temperature and expose it to lots of heat? The egg cooks, right? The proteins in the egg denature. They change their structure. Sometimes that denaturing is permanent. Sometimes it's reversible. Either way, if it's not supposed to be what's happening, it's not great. So you don't want your proteins denaturing unnecessarily. And you also want all of your metabolic functions to work properly. One of the major byproducts of your metabolism is heat. That's how you're making body heat. But if your temperature goes too far outside of that range in one direction or another, it's going to influence the activity of your cells and the organelles that are responsible for helping to make heat. You can drive up their activity, you can drive down their activity. That has its own consequences. So you want to keep your own body temperature within this range. Now, what's cool about us, and not all organisms do this, is we can do this on our own. We can keep our own body temperature within this range using a set of checks and balances that we have going on between our brain and our cells and stuff like that. Some other species require an input of heat or need to go to cool places in order to cool things off. In their case, keeping their body within that optimal range is behaviorally driven as opposed to internally, hormonally, neurotransmitter driven. And finally, we have to be within an appropriate atmospheric pressure range. This is to make sure that gas exchange is facilitated properly. So what do we do when we breathe, right? Here's our lungs, and here's our bronchi and trachea. We want to breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. I don't know if you've taken any physics before that talks about, or chemistry that talks about gas laws and pressures, but basically you can't release a gas into an environment in which the pressure for that gas is higher. So if you have very, very high atmospheric pressure, if you're, say, down in a super deep mine, I'm not really sure where this would happen, but if you are in one of those circumstances, if the pressure out here is really high and you breathe in, lots more air can come in. Okay? Your lung is really acting like a bellows. When your lung gets bigger, the space inside of it increases and gas is passively forced into the lungs. You want oxygen, you're going to diffuse more oxygen into your bloodstream. If you have too high of a pressure, the force of that air can be so much that it can cause damage to your lungs. Now, let's say you didn't get that point, but you have lots more air coming into your lungs, lots more oxygen coming into your lungs. Now you have to exhale, right? You have to get carbon dioxide, the byproduct of metabolism, out. If you have a high pressure out here, this exhalation is going to be very difficult. Again, breathing is a passive process. When your lungs expand in volume, air is passively drawn into it. When they decrease in volume, when they shrink up, air is passively forced out of them. If the pressure outside of the lungs is high enough, you can't properly exhale. You can't properly off-gas your carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is going to stay in your bloodstream too much. When carbon dioxide stays in your bloodstream too much, it makes your blood acidic. Your blood is now moving outside of an optimal pH. That's going to affect all of this other stuff ultimately. So your atmospheric pressure is something that we don't really think about because we just naturally live within these environments. But it is something that comes into play. An instance in which we do have to really consider that in more day-to-day life is when we fly, right? If you go up in altitude, the pressure drops. Here we are. I'm going to do a terrible airplane. Oh, that's better than I thought it would be. Okay. The pressure is lower here. So if you're just sitting in here in a plane that's not pressurized, it's going to be really hard to inhale and get enough oxygen. Exhalation is going to be fine. Inhalation is going to be very difficult. Getting enough oxygen is going to be very difficult. So in the early days of aviation, they had to think about that. And what they ended up having to do is pressurize the cabin so that the pressure inside the airplane is the same roughly as at ground or sea level. Same pressure. And this helps make sure that you can inhale properly and you can exhale properly. So your body's goal is to, overall, as an organism, as just sort of a thing that lives and moves around in the world, is to achieve homeostasis so that eventually it can reproduce. Homeostasis refers to the body's ability to maintain stable internal conditions despite constantly changing external conditions. Remember, some animals can't do this as well. Some animals, you call them like cold-blooded, need to do this behaviorally. They need to move to warm places, move to cool places, move more, move less to get more or less heat. We have internal mechanisms that can do a lot of this stuff. You want to achieve homeostasis so your body continues working optimally. You want to make sure you consume enough nutrients and the right balance of nutrients, so that you can fuel metabolic processes. You also need to consume oxygen to fuel those metabolic processes. Those metabolic processes are going to generate heat. You want to make sure you retain enough heat and also get rid of the extra heat so that your body can stay within the right pH range, your proteins don't denature, and you want to stay within a certain range of air pressures as well. In order to maintain homeostasis, now if you maintain homeostasis properly, you're going to be theoretically capable of reproduction, and every organism's sole goal in life, us lizards, bacteria, is to make more of itself, right? Just from an evolutionary standpoint, not a health standpoint. So you have to be able to stay in that range and maintain a homeostatic balance in order to achieve that goal. In order to maintain homeostasis, you need 3 things. You need a receptor, you need a control center, and you have an effector. Something that picks up input, something that processes that input and determines what to do next, and then an output to do that thing to maintain homeostasis. Receptor detects the change. The control center gets that information, compares it against a set point, and then issues instructions. An effector actually executes those instructions. Receptors involve afferent pathways. Think afferent at, going towards the brain. Efferent is away from the brain. I think efferent like exits. E and E. Okay? This should be fairly intuitive, hopefully. Let's take an example, just off the top of my head. Temperature, right? You have skin receptors in your skin that are there just to detect changes in temperature. If it picks up that it's very, very hot outside, it's going to take that information and shoot it up to the brain. The brain is going to take that hotness information and compare it with where your body ought to be. If it picks up information that says, hey, the surface of this person's skin is 40 degrees Celsius, the brain's going to say, oh shoot, I'm supposed to be at 37. I need to do something to make sure that we get the skin back to 37. So what it'll do is it'll issue instructions to your sweat glands to turn on, secrete liquid to the surface. Liquid holds on to a lot of heat, and when that liquid vaporizes, it brings that heat away with it. You sweat, it evaporates, you cool down. Receptor would be that skin receptor, control center is your brain, and the effector would ultimately be the nerves that leave the brain to the sweat gland and the sweat gland itself. There's two types of homeostatic mechanisms that we need to be concerned about: negative feedback and positive feedback loops. Negative feedback is exactly what I just described. Your body picks up that something's different, your body interprets it, and then does something to offset that change. Ultimately, that means you're going to hover within a certain range at all times. If something is getting too hot, your body's going to try to make it cool. If your blood pressure is high, your body's going to want to adjust to accommodate that higher blood pressure, so that that increase in blood volume or whatever, so that your blood pressure stays within a certain range. A positive feedback is more unusual. Negative feedback is overwhelmingly what happens in the body. Almost everything that your body does is a negative feedback process. If you get an exam question and you don't know what it is, if it's sort of a stably situation as the outcome, go negative feedback. And heck, if you just plain don't know, guess negative feedback, because there's a really good chance that'll be right. Most things are negative feedback. There are a few of what's called positive feedback loops. In this case, what's usually happening is your body identifies that something kind of weird is going on, and you need to purge yourself of that weirdness. So what your body will do is it will put in place some sort of a stimulus that, instead of offsetting the original thing, it increases and increases and increases and increases until that weirdness is gone, and then it puts back into place its original negative feedback loops so it can stay back to normal. Fever is an example of this. Childbirth is an example of this. We'll illustrate those shortly. But just as another recap, negative feedback offsets what's happening. Your body detects something's happening, says it's not right, puts into place something to bring it back to normal. Positive feedback, your body detects something's not right, your body puts into place something that goes stronger and stronger and stronger, more until that thing is just gone. And then it goes into negative feedback stuff to bring itself back to normal. Positive feedback is a finite process. It's only going to happen for a while. Negative feedback is constantly happening day in and day out. I'm sorry, the picture got cut off here. So a negative feedback loop is just what we've been talking about with temperature stuff. Your body has a receptor in the skin. This is my very anatomically correct person. You have a receptor in the skin that picks up that it's too hot. It sends that information to the brain. Your brain says, no, it's too hot. We need to do something different. And it'll send information back to the sweat glands. The sweat glands will release liquid onto the surface of the skin that absorbs the heat of your body very nicely, the extra heat, and then dissipates it out into the environment. The opposite of that would be a cold temperature, right? Maintaining a warm environment, internal environment, in the face of cold temperatures is still a negative feedback loop. Your body, and I'll do this person bigger this time so I'm not so crowded. Those same types of skin receptors are going to pick up a cold temperature, bring it back to the brain, the brain is going to say, no, not good. Go back to the outside of your body and put in place a shivering. When you shiver, your body's doing more work. When you do more work, you burn more energy. When you burn energy, you create heat. Heat is a byproduct of burning energy. Another thing that happens in both of these feedback loops is you either constrict or dilate your blood vessels. As I mentioned with sweat, liquids hold on to a lot of heat, and they're very good at holding on to heat and then taking the heat with them when they evaporate and they go places. So one thing your body does, there's your arm, is part of that feedback loop with the sweat glands too. So your body picked up a hot temperature, your brain said no. It's going to not only send that signal to your sweat glands to release heat that way, but it's also going to send information to the blood vessels right under your skin to get bigger, to get wider. And your body is actually going to send more blood to the surface of your skin when it's hot. Remember, that picks up heat and it releases heat well. So all of that extra warmth that's still in your skin is going to be able to be released more effectively into the sweat that your sweat glands release. This is drawing heat outside of your body so that it can dissipate into the environment. With cold, you're told to shiver, right? So you can make more heat. But another thing your body is going to do is with your blood vessels, if that's your regular blood vessel, it's going to shrink them up. And it's going to expand the width of your blood vessels in the core of your body. Your body knows that your organs and stuff are a little more important than any given patch of skin, so it's going to prioritize their survival first. If you have less blood close to the skin, you have less liquid that's holding on to heat there and less opportunity for that heat to dissipate into the environment. When you keep it deep into the middle of your body, you can hold on to that heat better to keep your heart going, your liver going, your brain going, etc. So a homeostatic process we've illustrated quite nicely. A negative feedback loop offsets the original stimulus somehow, but it doesn't necessarily do it in just one way. There might be more than one thing going on to maintain that negative feedback, to maintain that homeostatic balance. In the case of temperature, when it gets hot, your blood vessels near your skin dilate to release heat into the environment better. You release sweat, that'll pick up that heat better and release it in the environment as well. When it's cold, the blood vessels close to your skin will constrict, they'll shrink up. That provides less opportunity for heat from your blood to dissipate in the environment. Also, it triggers your muscles to shiver. That shivering is movement, so it requires energy, and when you burn energy, you create heat. I'm actually going to skip this. I usually included this as a way of talking about how one would maintain thermal homeostasis by talking about different creatures like cold-blooded and endotherms and ectotherms. I've already touched on that. We have internal mechanisms where endotherms, we create our own sort of internal thermal environment. Other creatures have to do that behaviorally. So positive feedback it's not exactly the opposite of a negative feedback. Negative feedback, you get a stimulus, your body says that's not great, it takes an action to offset the stimulus, to sort of neutralize it. With a positive feedback loop, you end up with your body detects something's wrong, it puts into motion some runaway train kind of an effect until that thing is gone, and then it can go back to regular homeostatic negative feedback loop. A classic example is with a fever. So when you have a fever, you have something wrong in your body. You have bacteria, let's say, growing in your body. Now, if you have bacteria growing in your body, something you should automatically know is that that bacteria is really happy living at your body temperature. You can't really get infected by stuff that doesn't like your internal environment, that doesn't like your temperature, that doesn't like your pH, that doesn't like your osmotic balances, that doesn't like whatever. So whatever's in there likes living at your normal body temperature. Your brain knows this. It picks up signals of infection that your immune system brings up to it, and it says, oh crap, we have to get rid of this infection. So what it'll do, a really effective means, is to crank up the thermostat so that your body temperature gets higher. That creates an unfavorable environment for the infection, bacteria, virus, fungus, whatever. And hopefully that fever will help kill off the virus or the bacteria or whatever. Your immune system is going to do a lot of work too, but cranking up the temperature is going to make it a less conducive environment for that infection to live. Turns out it also makes a better environment for certain immune cells to work, but we're just going to stick with the effect on the infection. So your body temperature sees, or your body sees this infection. It says, no thank you, we want to get rid of it. It's happy living at 37 Celsius. You crank up the temperature to 38 Celsius. That's not enough to kill off that. So it cranks it up a little more to 39 Celsius. Still not enough to kill it. Maybe it'll crank it up to 40. And once this starts to die off, for one reason or another, you've cranked up the thermostat enough so that it's really not conducive for your infection to live anymore, or your immune system is now capable of handling it better, and so the numbers of the bacteria or virus or whatever are going down. Once that neutralization happens, only then will your body stop this runaway process. In that process of cranking up the thermostat, all your regular hotness measures are going to go into place. You're going to start to sweat. You're going to have your blood vessels are going to dilate close to your skin. You're going to just sort of overall feel hot when you have a fever. When it comes back down, your body brings that temperature back down. The regular cool stuff is going to kick in. Your blood vessels are going to constrict back up. You're going to feel chilly again, or at least a better temperature. And you're going to release less heat into the environment. Interestingly, in the process, the initial process of cranking up your thermostat, it'll feel like you're too cold at first, so that your body can start to put into place the other stuff to crank up the thermostat. You feel cold, you get the chills, so that your muscles work, so that you burn energy, so that you make heat, so that your body temperature can go up. It's part of the cranking up of the thermostat. All right, so for the sake of clarity, let's go back between negative and positive a little more and give some more examples. Another classic example of negative feedback is the balance of blood glucose. So how your body regulates blood glucose is basically an insulin-glucagon feedback loop. You pound back a Coke, right? You consume a huge amount of sugar. You eat a packet of Sour Patch Kids in one sitting, right? The sugar levels in your blood, your glucose levels, skyrocket. Now, your cells can't just use that sugar automatically. You have to be able to get the sugar into your cells. There's special receptors on your cells that let in glucose, but they're not just always open. You need a key to open that door to let the glucose in. Insulin is that key. So when your blood glucose levels shoot up, your pancreas secretes insulin. That insulin can bind to the glucose, and by binding to the glucose, you can unlock the door to the cells so that your cells can take up the glucose. Now that the glucose is inside of the cells, you can use it for energy. As glucose is shuttled into the cells and out of your bloodstream, your blood glucose levels go down. And you go back down to a homeostatic level place. Another alternative, your blood glucose levels go up. You have more than your body can really use. The extra is another pathway for negative feedback. The extra will be taken up by the liver, and it'll convert it into a longish term storage molecule called glycogen. Glycogen will hang out for a little while, and if the glycogen isn't used, it'll turn into fat. Now let's say your blood glucose level goes down. You pounded back a whole container or whatever of Sour Patch Kids in a sitting. Your blood glucose skyrocketed, but now you've skipped lunch. The Sour Patch Kids is all you've eaten today. So you've completed this cycle. Body's used your sugar for energy because the insulin was able to let it in. Glucose is getting out of the bloodstream and into the cells. Your blood glucose lowers, but shoot, we're overshooting it. We haven't eaten anything in a while. So then what'll happen is that information is once again going to get sent to the brain, and the brain's going to turn on your pancreas. Interesting, right? Your pancreas is part of the blood glucose going up and part of the blood glucose going down processes. Your pancreas is going to secrete a different component. It's sort of like the opposite of insulin, called glucagon. Glucagon goes to the liver and tells it to release into the bloodstream this glycogen. Hey, you know that stuff you just packed away for energy, for shortish, medium-term storage? We're going to have to harvest a little bit of that now. Your liver converts glycogen to glucose, releases that glucose into the bloodstream, and now your blood glucose levels can go back to normal. Ultimately, the end result is this looping back to normal that's classic of a negative feedback loop. Maintaining the proper water content of the blood is another negative feedback loop. You should have a certain amount of percentage of water in your blood. Your blood should be a certain percentage of water. This is going to make sure that water can move in and out of cells at a proper pressures, that molecules that are dissolved in the blood can come and go according to normal rules. Everything's concentration is in the right place for your body. If you drink a ton of water, you're going to dump a bunch of water to the bloodstream. Your brain is going to pick that up and say, shoot, this is too much water. We got to figure out something to do. One of the things that your brain makes is a hormone called antidiuretic hormone, ADH. A diuretic is something that makes you pee more. Antidiuretic is something that makes you pee less. So when you have lots of water in your blood, you want to pee it off. So you're going to make less of that hormone that keeps you from peeing. The amount of water reabsorbed by your kidneys, brought back into your body by the kidneys, is going to be less, and more of it's going to go out in the urine. You drink lots of water, your body suppresses the stuff that makes you keep water, you pee more of it out. Now, take note, it doesn't actually put into place a mechanism that makes you pee more. It just suppresses a hormone that is designed to make you pee less. Now you haven't drank water in a while. You've been peeing a bunch, right? So your water content in your blood is going to perhaps go low. This can happen if you consume too much salt also, because your cells are going to take in that salt, and the salt is going to suck more fluid into the cells. Or if you sweat, which is just an offloading of water effectively from your bloodstream. So your body took pains to offload all that extra water, but now you've forgotten to drink more, so you're too low, or you've been sweating, or you had too much salt. Your brain's going to detect that also. It's going to make more antidiuretic hormone, so it's going to better suppress peeing, basically. And your kidneys are going to be told by that hormone, hey, whatever water's coming through you, don't let it go. Make sure it goes back into the bloodstream. And that water can go back and stay in the blood. So that maybe you're not increasing the amount of water in your bloodstream, but you're at least not offloading it like you were before. Again, these processes loop back to the beginning, to this nice, happy, homeostatic middle. If you think about it, all of these also kind of make a figure eight. You have too much of something, you offset, you go to normal. If you don't keep it at normal, you'll have to do a different offset to bring it back to normal. An example of positive feedback, remember, is it's like the fever. It's like the push, 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 gone. Speaking of pushing, having a baby delivering a baby represents a positive feedback loop. So by mechanisms that are not well understood. At some point, your body decides that baby has to come out. Your brain's going to decide this has to happen. When your brain decides that, it's going to secrete a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is going to travel in the bloodstream. Eventually, it's going to make its way to the uterus. And it's going to cause the uterus to push down on that baby towards the cervix, which is its first major hurdle to getting out. When the baby's head pushes on the cervix, that has nerves that go to the brain and say, hey, there's pressure, we got to get that baby out more urgently now. And your brain goes, oh shoot, okay, more oxytocin. More contractions, more pushing, more oxytocin. More contractions, more pushing, more oxytocin. More oxytocin. On and on and on and on and on until that baby is out. Once the baby is out, and the placenta too, you no longer have any of this stimulus that says that something needs to be expelled. And your brain can stop releasing oxytocin, and ordinary negative feedback loops that keep your uterus at a normal size with a normal blood volume, healing, happy, can start to go into place. It's a runaway train effect that gets rid of, as opposed to offsetting something or neutralizing, gets rid of something so that you can get back to normal. Lactation is a really similar feedback loop. You have, and it actually involves oxytocin as well. So if you have the newborn baby suckling at their mother's breast, that's going to bring a signal up to the brain, the hypothalamus of the brain, and it's going to do a couple of things. Remember, your feedback loops don't always have just one thing that they're acting on. Usually it's more than one. So in this case, when the baby suckles at your breast, it's going to stimulate the pituitary gland, which is going to cause you to make more of two hormones, prolactin and oxytocin. Prolactin makes you make more milk. Oxytocin helps you release your milk. As the baby continues to suckle, more milk can be released, and your body is stimulated to keep producing more milk. When the baby lets go, this feedback loop stops, and your body stops releasing so much milk. Now, this is a slower effect. You continue to make a little bit more milk after the fact so that you have enough for the baby's next feed. Also, the more the baby feeds, the more often, the hungrier the baby is, the more it consumes in a sitting, the more this is going to run away and take off. The more the baby feeds, the more the baby suckles, the more milk you're going to produce, the easier it'll be to release it. This is one of the reasons why when you're still in the hospital right after delivering a baby, if you're interested in breastfeeding, they'll tell you, pop that baby on right away, offer it food all the time. You're not really making milk yet. You have this other stuff that you make in the beginning called colostrum that you make during pregnancy, but that's going to stop soon. If you don't start stimulating your nipple, which is going to stimulate your brain to make the appropriate nursing hormone, lactation hormones, you're not going to really make that. You need that stimulus to make sure that that happens and that comes in and is effective. Wound healing, another classic example of positive feedback. So you have a boo-boo, right? You have a break or a tear in a blood vessel, and blood starts leaking out of your bloodstream. Shoot, that's bad. Your body is going to detect that you have this open edge where blood's leaving. Your body's going to decide that's bad. The edges of these wounds are going to secrete something into your bloodstream that can get up to your brain that says that there's a breakage. That breakage is going to attract platelets. Platelets are going to stick to the edge and start to form a clot. Now, what's cool about the platelets is the open edges of the platelets are going to secrete a hormone or a molecule into your bloodstream that then attracts more platelets. More platelets. Back here, you still don't have a fully healed wound, so you attract more platelets. Still not healed? More platelets. Still not healed? more platelets, more, until finally that open area is blocked off by platelets. Once there's no more edge, sort of, to fill with platelets, they stop secreting this molecule into your bloodstream, and platelets are no longer attracted to the area. So again, just to illustrate, you have a positive feedback mechanism that involves increasing until something is gone. Blood loss is stopped completely. The baby is expelled. The baby has stopped nursing. Negative feedback loops, you bring something back to normal. Temperature goes up, bring it back to range. Temperature goes down, bring it back to range. These feedback loops are ubiquitous in the environment. They're not unique to humans. They're not even unique to life. You find this in the environment as well. If you have cooling in the planet, you're going to be able to grow more ice. If you grow more ice, ice reflects sunlight and heat back into the universe. It's a reflective thing. That's albedo. You increase the reflection of all that heat out into the world, out into the universe. So you keep less heat, so you get colder. So you can make more ice. So you reflect more heat away. So you keep less heat. So you get colder. On and on and on and on. Same thing with warming. That's a runaway train kind of effect. That's why it's so important for us to try to get tamped down on any of our warming processes planet-wide as quickly as we can. Early intervention pays off, because once this starts going, it's only going to go faster and faster and faster and faster.